It is Friday, January 28th. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright everyone, welcome back. It's been yet again another very busy week for PlayStation news, or at least fairly busy, right? Considering we're still in January and we're not even at February just yet, but so much has already happened within this first month. So there's just, it feels like there's a lot going on. But as always, let's start with our PS Plus reminder. If you haven't just yet, grab the January games. You have a few days left. February 1st, it's going to change over to EA Sports UFC 4, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, and then for PS5 only, Planet Coaster. Now this, in all honesty, is not really a great month, obviously. I've seen a lot of people very upset. Justifiably, you've got a sports game in there, which, sure, it has broad appeal, but if you're not into sports games, I mean, that's going to be a total miss. Tiny Tina's Assault, that's like, what, a standalone DLC, and I believe it's fairly cheap, so that's like, not misleading, what's the word I'm looking for? It's insulting, maybe? And then Planet Coaster, now I like simulation-based games and builders, but that's also a bit more unique of a genre, and that's not going to appeal to everybody, so you can see how sometimes PS Plus ebbs and flows with major releases. We had a lot of really good months, and now we're getting into February where we've got Horizon, Elden Ring, a bunch of other good stuff, so at the very least, if this isn't really a good month for you, then there's probably something releasing relatively soon where that'll keep up a lot of your time. But anyway, while we're talking about services, we can also mention very quickly for PS Now, it looks like one of the, what I would presume is probably one of the bigger titles in the February lineup for PS Now, that might have leaked a bit early, where, as spotted on Reddit and Twitter, it looks like it might be Grand Theft Auto Vice City, the Definitive Edition. And this has happened on a few occasions for PS Now in particular, where for some reason, a few days prior to the announcement going live for the entire lineup, sometimes, one of those promotional images for PS Now might update server side on your console, and that will kind of give away what games we're expecting. So at least for this, we might be looking at GTA Vice City, the Definitive Edition, with a expiration date of May 2nd. Now, getting into our next news story, we had yet another situation pop up where, people took these things as evidence of local PS3 playback coming to PS5, and so yet again, I'm here to tell you that's probably not what's happening here. So on on Saturday, we had the Japanese PlayStation Twitter account sent out a tweet. It was in Japanese, but it said 123, the date January 23rd, which would be on a Sunday, and that was easily explained as an announcement for a commercial in Japan with the Japanese singer-songwriter Kenshi Yonezu. And bear in mind that official major announcements are not going to come from other territories, or I guess they will, right? But you're going to get it first from the main PlayStation Twitter account, YouTube channel, the PS blog, and also it wouldn't be on a weekend, so that was easily explained. The other thing that happened was on PS5, when viewing trophies, we had another visual bug where your PS4 games had the PS4 label replaced with a PS3 one, which that label is not new. It's there for PS3 games as well, which you can see those trophies on PS5 or when you're playing PS Now games, but that label replaced the PS4 one. Your trophies went to 0%, but the trophy podium breakdown was still accurate for what you earned in those games, but that's what happened there, which I will admit, I don't think I've encountered that one personally or seen other people talk about it or mention it over the past year, but I mean, it's not like that wouldn't be evidence, right? I mean, you have to remember that PS5 heavily leans on server-side information, right? When you're logged in, everything from the PS Store, your friends list, viewing trophies, those are all stored server-side, so you can run into a lot of weird things that shouldn't be displaying the way that they're displaying, and you probably ran into a lot of them, but you don't think that they're evidence of something because it's not, well, it wouldn't be in the context of this where we're on the precipice of a service revamp, and it really does not help when we've got all these Twitter accounts and websites, and it's just getting to the point where, it's being willed into existence, but there's nothing there. It's not it's being called a backwards compatibility rumor, which I guess to a degree or by definition it's a rumor because people keep talking about it, but I would say it's not a rumor because there's nothing there. There's no source, there's nothing behind it, right? So not to act like I'm exhausted with this, but I would love for it to happen, but these are not things telling us it's coming. And if it does, I've explained before where it's probably going to be a very small library. I can see Sony not letting you use your original discs. I mean, it's just, again, PS3 was a worst case scenario, a perfect storm of why it probably won't happen. So once again, we will leave it there. Next up, let's talk about that Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection on PS5, where it comes out today. So if you're picking it up and playing it, I hope you have a good time, especially because these are really great games, and that's why, unsurprisingly, it did review quite well. It's principally still Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy just on PS5, where they look stunning, especially all those different modes where the 121 in particular, I kind of want to try it, but it's also something where I know I have no time to play these games right now with February coming up, but the point is, I wanted to briefly mention a really weird situation with the game's trophy list, which I know some of you don't care too much about this, but I am dumbfounded how Naughty Dog seemed to have, how they messed this one up. Because what happened here was the game has one list, so one platinum, where it's basically just Uncharted 4 with the platinum, and Lost Legacy is being treated as DLC. And DLC or I guess the Lost Legacy separate list acting as DLC, it's still the full game. It's just that now Uncharted 4 has a list where there's one new gold where it requires you to earn all the trophies in Lost Legacy. So they've effectively removed a platinum for no particular reason, because oftentimes with collections or ports, you expect a similar list or, different separate platinums. They're allowed to do that. So I don't know why they didn't do that here, especially for, the save file import where you can auto pop. So yeah, you can get the one platinum, but why remove the other one, right? I don't know how publishers have not figured out that you are throwing away hundreds, if not thousands of copies from being sold, because there are people that, think about those things. Point is, really weird. I don't know why they did it that way. But probably more interesting is Naughty Dog's Sean Escagee, where he was recently speaking with Games Radar, being asked about, possibly doing another Uncharted. How's the studio feel? And he said, and I quote, "I think we can say for certain that we can never say never. Yeah, Uncharted is a franchise we love, that the studio loves, I love, and Uncharted The Lost Legacy director Kurt loves. It's a world we want to see more of, so I can certainly say that." We've seen this before with a lot of developers where they are pretty open about how they don't want to, completely dismiss a franchise. And if Sony wants to do another one, they don't have to, Naughty Dog doesn't have to be the ones to do it. But I remember saying around the time of, Lost Legacy, shortly after that came out, and people were theorizing, they can do more Chloe and Nadine, or based on the ending of Uncharted 4, they can take the story from that point forward, which if you've played, you know what I'm talking about. So, and at the time I was like, we've had a lot of Uncharted, let's give it a rest. And now I kind of am warming up to the idea of maybe getting another one, because one isn't in development right now, as far as we know. I'm fairly confident there's not one coming. So if it maybe starts production in, let's say, the next 1 or 2 years, and then we don't see it for another 4 to 5 years because it's going to be in development, I'd actually be okay with another Uncharted in, let's say, 2020. What would that be, 6, 7, somewhere around there, right? But I would actually be interested in more Uncharted at that point. But that's kind of that's very far away. And it doesn't have to be Naughty Dog, but yeah, I would actually be okay with another one. With that said, though, we can also mention that for the Uncharted movie, we got a final trailer here, and same thing, it looks fun, coming out February 18th, and remember, if you upgrade from a PS4 copy of Uncharted 4 or Lost Legacy to the Legacy of Thieves collection, you get you're entitled to a movie ticket, depending on where you are in your local theaters, but, you can do that, and maybe when I go see it, I will do a short little review here on LTPS the following Friday, but still, the expectations are low, let's just put it that way. Moving on to our next news story, let's talk about Destruction AllStars, because this game recently had its big update, version 3.0.1, where it makes some pretty big fundamental changes to the gameplay loop, where there's more feedback on slamming other vehicles or making it more skill-based to reach your breaker. There's a pretty big changelog, but one thing that somebody noticed on the subreddit Gaming Leaks and Rumors is that during a 1-hour maintenance period, if you started the game, you could actually see some underlying code referencing the challenges in the game, where I believe some of those challenges, it says BS_free-to-play_challenge. I think all of them say that, but it pretty much implies that perhaps the game is going free-to-play soon. Truly free-to-play outside of PS Plus, because the timeline here, of course, is that well, initially the game was going to be $70, then PS Plus, which it was on there for 2 months, and then now it's on sale for $20, which, okay, $20, but that still seems steep for a game that is not doing all that well. So outside of Plus, with this update, where it's actually sounding like this update is what the game needed, like now it's going in the right direction where it might be a bit more fun. That would seem to add up, right? If Sony really wants to give this game a fair shot at, seeing some success, it's an inevitability that the game has to go free to play outside of PlayStation Plus. So anybody can download it, jump in, and it seems like that might be the case. And honestly, I would love for that to happen, right? I don't really want this game to fail. Foundationally, it's okay, but it can be better. And maybe now we're seeing that it could get a lot better. Now, on the flip side of that, and while we're talking about Lucid Games, we can also bring up this rumor where, well, it's 100% a rumor. I would not put much weight into this, but a lot of you sent this to me, so we'll talk about it real quick. But the Oops Leak Twitter account sent out this tweet where they say, and I quote here, "MotorStorm reboot was discussed at Sony. The company wants an arcade racing game associated with the PlayStation brand and counterweight to Gran Turismo series. Recent Twisted Metal developer switch could indicate that the project might be given to Lucid Games." Now, this is the same Twitter account that sometime last year they put out some info about the next BioShock game. They were tweeting out some alleged slides that leaked out and a logo, but obviously none of that's verifiable. We actually also had Colin Moriarty of Sacred Symbols, formerly of IGN and Kind of Funny. He had put out some info about the game as well, and that didn't line up with what the Oops Leak account put out, which that's why it's so complicated. We can't verify either of them, although granted, I would say Colin's probably going to be much more reliable versus a brand new account with no history. But to be fair, things are always going to be subject to change. So, I mean, this is a reach. I would not put much weight into this rumor. But obviously, yeah, I would be very excited for a new MotorStorm on PlayStation 5. I wouldn't be too concerned with Lucid as long as they don't, add anything new to it. It's just arcade racing, right? The problem with Destruction AllStars is the gameplay loop. It's a brand new IP and just it doesn't quite work in a number of areas, but it's a good foundation, as I like to say. If you give them an IP that's established, it's very simple, straightforward. They can make a good-looking arcade racer, and the best way I see this happening, or how I would go about doing this, is I would make it a collaboration project between Lucid and Wushu Studios, where they're located in Liverpool as well, and that's a lot of former staff that worked on the MotorStorm franchise. So that's, I'm not saying that's happening, but if it is, I would like more evidence to come out so that way I can, get excited about it. Next up, as I'm sure a lot of you probably saw from this past week, IGN's Jonathan Dornbush got to play about, 4 hours of Horizon Forbidden West, and we got new gameplay, new details, all that good stuff, which right now I won't display any of that to you, just old trailers. We won't talk too much about what we learned. We are close enough as is, so if you want to stay on that media blackout, I respect it. I'm pretty much there with you anyway. But if you didn't see all this stuff just yet, I will link it down below, so if you want to see the coverage, IGN has it. But we will touch on one thing, which is the German site GamePro is reporting based on what the game director has said. We have a good idea of how long the game actually is, which basically it's about the same length as Zero Dawn. So really we're looking at 20 something hours for the main campaign or the main storyline missions. If you do side quests or all the side quests, you can get it up to 40 hours. And then if you do everything, that could push it up to 50, 60 hours, which it's going to depend on your pace. But for the most part, I found Zero Dawn to be a really good sweet spot when it comes to not overstaying its welcome, but still feeling long enough to where it's a pretty meaty action-oriented RPG, which is basically what it is, right? An action-adventure game with RPG elements, but that sounds really good. So far, I love that it's about the same length. And as expected, we did finally get that infamous tweet where the game has gone gold. Confirmed. It's done. Congratulations, Guerrilla Games. Can't wait. Not much longer now. And we also found out very recently, or at least as I'm filming this, but review codes were just sent out, and it looks like the review embargo is set for February 14th. So 4 days prior to launch, we'll get reviews. We'll talk about that. And yeah, getting close. Can't wait. It's looking so good. Moving on to our next news story. This one is not exactly new. I guess probably the better way to put this is renewed interest based on one tweet from PlayStation's London studio, where they put out a tweet about how they're hiring for their PS5 online game. They're building a team from the ground up. We also have the PlayStation Studios head Herman Hulst respond saying he's excited about this project. And I mean, one thing to keep in mind right now, because we knew about this project, is that a lot of studios right now and a lot of publishers, the reason why they're indirectly announcing all these major projects so far ahead of time is that they're recruiting. So, I mean, that's why, as of recent, a lot of job listings are very revealing about, you know, here's a co-op game from so-and-so, here's an online game, dark narrative, here's, you know, some Star Wars projects that we're working on, here's Crisis 4. That's why we're hearing about all this stuff, because they want to generate interest when it comes to talent and recruiting. So eventually we'll have formal reveals where it's more, you know, consumer facing, but that's why this is happening the way it is. Probably more noteworthy is that we had Deviation Games, the PlayStation Studios partner that Sony signed on not that long ago. They also recently announced a brand new office in Canada. So they've got a bunch of job openings right now in the Los Angeles metropolitan area, but they recently put out a tweet about how they're, or they did confirm this because it was initially spotted on LinkedIn, but they've got a new opening in Canada, so they're really expanding as well. And once again, that's from, that company was founded by Dave Anthony, Jason Blundell of Call of Duty fame. So Sony signed on that project. We're expecting that one as well. There's a lot of online games coming from PlayStation. And across the board, a lot of publishers, a lot of developers, they're all expanding, they're all hiring. It's just, yeah, talent is actually quite an issue depending on your project and also the status of that particular company, right? Is it desirable to work for or is it not? And that's also the pretty big caveat there. Now, speaking of online games, we can segue nicely into our next story, which is about the future of the Call of Duty franchise on PlayStation platforms, because as reported by Jason Schreier via Bloomberg, it looks like we now have an idea of how long that might be. So it seems like at a minimum, we should be looking at the next 3 Call of Duty games on PlayStation, where it would be the mainline release for 2022 and 2023, and then in 2023, a successor to Warzone, or a Warzone 2 basically, which that would be a service-based game. So in theory, we could see new content and support in some way beyond 2023, but when it comes to a mainline release or 2024 and beyond, that's where it gets obviously much hazier. But apparently sources close to the matter are saying that, you know, at a minimum, we're looking at 3 more Call of Duty games on PlayStation, which I think is about what a lot of us were expecting, just because that also lined up with like when the acquisition would close, and at that point 2023 and beyond would be like, okay, that's where it might be a bit different, but depending on, you know, contracts that were signed, it could possibly go longer, but yeah, that sounds about expected. It's just that the conversation does still hold when it comes to what happens after, right? So will they, you know, force Sony's hand to put Game Pass on PlayStation? Would Sony even, you know, humor that idea? Maybe they'll just ship it on PlayStation and treat it like Minecraft, or will they make it exclusive like we're expecting for all these other games and IP that they acquired? Because that's the difference and the question mark here is that for Call of Duty, a well-known multi-platform IP, will that continue or will it not? But the reality is that there's still a lot of games and IP that Sony now no longer has, and that's where, as I've said before, they're fine now, but 2, 3, 4 years, that's where they're going to be in an awkward position, and, you know, they may have to do something about that, where right now they should be in a planning stage of some kind, which they may not necessarily do anything in particular right now, or not on the surface, because, you know, all these online games that we just talked about, you know, that predates the acquisition. They're always doing their own thing. They're not always reactionary to what Microsoft is doing. You know, we've had talks about that before. Very clearly, Sony oftentimes is in their own lane when it comes to, here's our pricing, our services, our games, you know, our hardware, here's how we're doing it. They don't respond to everything Microsoft does, but this is where it could, you know, seriously harm them if they're not, you know, accommodating for this particular situation where they're losing a lot of talent and IP. And that is the difference here. I'm still surprised that there's like, you know, some people aren't making this distinction, because it's a very clear difference, and I don't know if it's because it boils down to console war stuff when it comes to people having, you know, a preference or a bias, because obviously, you know, for a PlayStation customer, it's like, wow, this is huge, this is not great news. And then for an Xbox customer, it's like, what do you mean this is great? PlayStation makes acquisitions all the time. How is this no different? But there is a difference. And it's not necessarily about one being more noble than the other, right? So I know that's getting thrown around as well. But the reality is that when PlayStation makes an acquisition, it often has no bearing or influence at all to an Xbox customer, a Nintendo customer. It doesn't really change much of anything. What Microsoft has been doing is picking up publishers with multiple developers, upwards of hundreds of IP, and that's a lot of stuff that's no longer going to ship on PlayStation. It just has not been like that when Sony goes about picking up a studio that they've worked with for the last 15 something years, right? Like, that is the difference, and I don't know how people are not making that distinction. It seems somewhat silly to even try and compare the two. And the other thing is that, they all do timed exclusives, so I don't know why that's even being humored at all to begin with in this conversation. They've all the manufacturers, all platform holders have done timed exclusives and locked up third-party stuff in perpetuity on a title-per-title basis. That comes with the territory, but in this situation, this is where, in terms of a content lineup, because so much third-party is being, taken out of the rotation, so to speak. Not everybody plays, first-party games, right? In fact, you spend most of your time playing third-party stuff in between major first-party releases. So I like PlayStation first-party just as much as anybody, but if we have Microsoft pick up, another publisher, that's where it's going to get really awkward for Sony in 3, 4, 5 years when these games start coming out on Xbox and Sony doesn't have any of these, titles to sit in between their major releases, right? And that's where they could, lose some serious market share. But I digress. Obviously, the point is, with Call of Duty in particular, we don't know just yet, but, actually, probably a good segue to our next story, which is about the Ampere Analysis company. The director put out a sales prediction between PS5, Series S and X for this particular year. And for PS5, they predict, a 2-to-1 sales ratio against Microsoft, but they do expect Nintendo to still sell the most at 21 million Switches. PS5 would be 18 million, and then for Series S and X would be around 9 million. The thing is, it still depends on how many they make, really. Demand has still not been met just yet. But that is a ratio where right now it's not really impossible, because again, PlayStation 5 is doing really well. They don't have a problem currently, but they could, depending on what transpires, and by the end of PS5, going into PS6, that's where it could be a whole lot different depending on what Sony and also Microsoft does. Anyway, moving on to our next story. This one is really insane. I had to read this like 2 or 3 times to grasp what's happening here. So, Sony Pictures Classics has acquired the rights to the movie A Winter's Journey, which, on the surface, it's like, okay, what? But this movie is animated, and it's being partially painted and created in Media Molecule's Dreams. That's right. So over on their main site, as a quick synopsis to this movie, it's located in Bavaria, 1812. A lovelorn young poet banished from society is forced to wander across mountains, ice, and snow on a dangerous journey which will either lead him to death or to a new life. It's painted by the animation artist behind the Oscar-nominated Loving Vincent. A Winter's Journey is a romantic and epic tale which blends live action with CG and painted animation. The world of the film is the first to be built using PlayStation's Dreams, developed by PlayStation Studios' multiple BAFTA-winning game studio, Media Molecule. I cannot believe this is actually happening. That's insane. So now I'm going to carefully watch this movie, or the details about it, and when footage comes out, I want to see, because that's wow. What more can you say? It's such a powerful creation tool, and it kind of shows that with enough energy and manpower being put into it and the right talent, you can really take it a step above, what is, to many people, a PlayStation 4 video game, right? It's cool to see when it always goes beyond video games, whether it's something like, let's say, Folding at Home on PlayStation 3, or now something crazy like this, where you can paint Escape within Dreams and it can be used for a major motion picture. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, Very easy, follow the link down below. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and now announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about with you all from this past week. And unfortunately, got busy again, so no Tuesday video, but coming up, it's the one where you're probably expecting it, a 2022 themed video, so that's coming very soon, I promise, and that's all I've got for you right now. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.